Do the people around you help you grow, or do they slowly pull you away from yourself? Sometimes you ask yourself, why can't I value myself? But the reason may not only be the way you see yourself. Maybe, for years, the people around you made you feel, without even realizing it, that your feelings are not that important. Your efforts are not worth noticing. You are only lovable when you adapt. And after a while, a person may start to mistake the way others treat them for proof of their own worth. Someone doesn't see you and you think, I'm not worth being seen. Someone doesn't choose you and you think, I'm not good enough. Over time, someone else's unhealthy behavior toward you can become the way you measure your own value. But this is where the biggest misunderstanding begins. The way someone treats you is not a reflection of your worth. Often, it is a reflection of their character, their emotional capacity, and the way they relate to others. This is the third video in our series on the factors that shape self-worth. Today's topic is the messages we receive through relationships. We call these relational feedback. In other words, it is how other people's attitudes slowly turn into our inner voice. Because self-worth is not something that only forms in childhood and then stays fixed forever. Yes, its foundation is built in childhood, but the relationships we experience throughout life can either strengthen or weaken that foundation. Around some people, you feel more relaxed, more capable, and more valuable. Around others, you feel like you constantly have to explain yourself, prove yourself, defend yourself, or make yourself smaller. That difference is not random, because people send messages to one another not only through what they say, but also through what they make us feel. For example, if you were often excluded from a friend group as a child, as an adult, when you enter a new environment, you may immediately think, they won't want me here. If a teacher often belittled you, today you may feel much more afraid of making mistakes when learning something new. The issue is not only what happened in the past. The issue is how that experience still speaks inside your mind today. If a partner constantly criticized you, over time you may start to confuse love with criticism. If your efforts were repeatedly overlooked at work, you may begin to feel, no matter how hard I try, I'm never enough. Sometimes people leave, but the voice they left behind stays with us. And over time, that voice may turn into, I am worthless, I am not enough, I am not worthy of being cared for. But here is what you need to notice. What happened to you and the conclusion you drew about yourself from it are not the same thing. Someone replies to your message late. A healthier interpretation could be, they may be busy, but when self-worth is fragile, the mind can immediately go to, they don't care about me, I'm not important, I'm not worthy of love. Or someone criticizes you harshly. A healthier interpretation could be, the way they criticized me was not okay. If there is something I need to improve, I can take responsibility for that, but their harshness does not define my worth. But with low self-worth, it may sound like, I am completely inadequate. There is something wrong with me. No one accepts me as I am anyway. This is where the event itself and the meaning it awakens inside us begin to get mixed together. And sometimes what hurts the most is not the other person's behavior, but the conclusion we draw about ourselves because of that behavior. That is why, in relationships, it is so important to ask yourself these 3 questions. What did this person actually do to me? What meaning did I give to this behavior about myself? Does this meaning really belong to the present, or did it touch an old wound? Because some relationships repeat old wounds. If you were not seen as a child, as an adult, you may hold on too tightly to people who do not see you. If you had to adapt in order to receive love as a child, you may forget your own boundaries in adult relationships. If you learned that you had to avoid causing problems in order to be accepted, today you may struggle to speak up even when something bothers you. Because painful experiences can sometimes teach us, it is safer to withdraw. It is safer to stay silent. It is safer not to be fully myself. And after a while, instead of centering your own worth in the relationship, you begin to center the other person's reaction. Will they love me? Will they get angry at me? Will they leave me? Will they misunderstand me? Will they think I am good enough? As these questions increase, you begin to move away from your own center. You no longer ask, what do I feel? You start living through, what will they think? You no longer ask, is this relationship good for me? You start asking, who do I need to become in order to be accepted here? This is what happens when self-worth becomes too dependent on other people's behavior. Of course, we are all affected by relationships. We all want to be seen, loved, and valued. That is a deeply human need. But the problem begins when we hand over our entire sense of worth to the way other people behave. Because people are not always fair or emotionally mature, They do not always evaluate us from the right place. Sometimes someone's lack of love has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their capacity to love. Sometimes someone's criticism has less to do with your flaws and more to do with their own inner world. Sometimes someone's inability to see you does not mean you are not worth seeing. It means their way of seeing is limited. That is why you can ask yourself, around whom do I make myself smaller? Around whom do I feel like I constantly have to prove myself? Around whom can I exist naturally as I am? Around whom am I afraid to express my boundaries? And most importantly, am I trying to be valued in a place that is not right for me? Because trying to find your worth in a place that does not fit you can be exhausting. Sometimes, in order to be loved more, you give up more of yourself. In order to be accepted more, you stay silent more. In order to feel more valued, you suppress your own needs even more. But in the end, you may feel even more worthless in the very place where you stayed in order to feel valuable. Then you may move on to another relationship, another environment, another source of approval. But if your inner measure of worth has not changed, the same cycle can repeat with different people. One way to break this cycle is to learn how to separate your worth from other people's behavior. Because not every relationship gives you accurate information about who you are. Some relationships help you grow, some relationships make you smaller, some relationships help you see yourself more clearly, some relationships pull you away from yourself, and this is not always about your worth. Sometimes it is about the other person's maturity, capacity, and way of relating. The point here is not to blame everyone. The point is to notice in which relationships you lose yourself. Because if you want to strengthen your self-worth, if you want to learn how to value yourself, you need to look not only at how you see yourself, but also at how you feel around certain people. Today, ask yourself this. Do I truly feel my worth within myself, or do I keep measuring it through other people's behavior? You can write your answer in the comments. Around which people do you feel smaller, and around which people do you feel more natural? If you would like me to talk more about how social circles affect self-worth, you can also write that in the comments. If this topic feels helpful to you, you can subscribe and follow the rest of the series. In this video, we talked about how the messages we receive through relationships can affect our sense of self-worth. In the next video, I will talk about how success and failure shape our self-worth, because sometimes when we make a mistake, we do not simply say, "I made a mistake." We jump to the conclusion, "I am inadequate." And often, the deepest wound is not in the mistake itself, but in the meaning we attach to ourselves because of that mistake.